reception. Welcome to Storytime. Now, today, Waddle and Douglas have joined me because they want to show you the eggs that they're keeping warm under their bellies. So here's Douglas's egg. Can you see he's trying to keep it under his belly and on top of his feet so it doesn't get cold? And Waddle's doing the same. I think Waddle's doing a little bit of a better job because he's a little bit more flexible there. But there we go, boys. We've seen reception have seen how you're taking care of your eggs, okay? So I'll read the story. Do you want to listen to it as well? Here we go. Today's story is called Poles Apart, and it's all about a penguin family that gets a little bit lost. Let's have a look. As everyone knows, penguins are found at the South Pole and never near the North Pole. At least, not until the day the Pilchard Browns got lost on their way to a picnic. Mr. Pilchard Brown was in charge of the map. He told everyone to turn right at the snowman, which was wrong. Oh dear. Now they were all on the other side of the world. Mr. and Mrs. Pilchard Brown, Peaky, Poots and Pog. I think that's the three children. Peaky, Poots and Pog. And they're all different sizes. There, we can tell which ones they are. Oh dear. They were drifting towards an enormous, furry, white... I wonder what it could be. What's enormous and furry and white? Oh, can you think of anything that's enormous, furry and white? It might have been on our front cover. Have a think. Ooh, does anybody recognise this creature? What do you think it is? It's a kind of bear. That's right, a polar bear. Is it a lion? Is it a tiger? Asked Peaky and Poots. Is it a picnic blanket? Asked Pog. The enormous something looked them up and down. He'd never seen anything like the Pilchard Browns before. I'm Mr. White, he said. I'm a polar bear. And you are... We're parrots, said Peaky and Poots. Porky pies, said Pog. We're penguins, said Mrs. Pilchard Brown. I think Mr. Pilchard Brown has gone a little bit wrong because he's holding his map upside down. And I think we all know that you can't read a map upside down. Oh dear. They're lost in the North Pole. What are you doing here? Wondered Mr. White. This is where polar bears live, not penguins. We're going to a picnic at the South Pole, said Pog. Well, this is the North Pole, my friends. The South Pole is 12,430 miles. That way. Oh. So, all right, I was a few miles out, shrugged Mr. Pilchard Brown. Anyone can make a mistake. Don't think of it as a mistake, said Mr. White. Think of it as a big adventure. I've often dreamed of being the first polar bear to reach the South Pole. Mummy says we should always follow our dreams, said Peaky. Daddy says we should always follow him, said Poots. Lead the way, said Mr. White. Oh, I hope he's going to find their way back home. The penguins followed Mr. White over land and sea. Eek, said Peaky. Whoa, said Poots. Can we have our picnic now? Said Pog. But it wasn't the best spot, so they followed Mr. White all the way to... Oh, I wonder why it wasn't the best spot for a picnic. Can anybody see something in the sea? Oh, something that might eat them. Uh-oh. The sharks. Definitely not the best spot for a picnic. Followed them all the way to America. Howdy, said Mr. Pilcher Brown. Busy, said Peaky. Ooh, buzzing, said Poots. Can we have our picnic yet? Said Pog. Not now, dear, said Mr. Pilcher Brown. America was awesome, but it wasn't home. So they followed Mr. White all the way to... Ooh, England. How do you do? Said Mr. Pilcher Brown. Oh, grey, said Peaky. Grand, said Poots. Can we have our picnic yet? Said Pog. Not now, dear, said Mrs. Pilcher Brown. England was charming, but it wasn't home. So they followed Mr. White all the way to... Oh, this is a lovely place. This is called Venice, and it's in Italy. Ciao, said Mr. Pilcher Brown. Oh, wet, said Peaky. Wonderful, said Poots. What do you think Pog said? Can we have our picnic yet? Not this time. I need a wee, said Pog. Oh dear. Not in there, dear, said Mrs. Pilcher Brown. Uh-oh, I think he was going to wee in the water. Italy was magnifico, but it wasn't home. So they followed Mr. White all the way to... Whoa, look. This is India. Namaste, said Mr. Pilcher Brown. We say that in our yoga sessions, don't we, Namaste? Wow, it's hot, said Peaky. It's huge, said Poots. Put the python down, dear, said Mrs. Pilcher Brown. Dear. I think Pog's got himself into a little sticky pickle there. India was dazzling, but it wasn't home. So they followed Mr. White all the way to... Oh, this is where I went last year. Can anybody in R1 remember where Mrs Carroll went to? Australia. Good day, said Mr. Pilcher Brown. Faster, said Peaky. Fun, said Poots. Oh, Pog's back to his usual sentence, his usual question. Can we have our picnic now? Soon, said Mrs. Pilcher Brown. Australia was bonza, but it still wasn't home. So they followed Mr. White. More adventures. Over land and over sea. On and on they went. But all of the wonderful places in the world, there was no place like home. Are we nearly there yet? Said Peaky, Poots and Pog. It's not far now, said Mr. White, and they followed him left, right, all the way. Can you remember where the penguins live? Was it the North Pole or the South Pole? The South Pole, that's right. All the way home. Please stay, Mr. White, said Peaky and Poots. "You can share our picnic," said Pog. So Mr White stayed, and for a while he was happy. But the South Pole wasn't his home. He was a polar bear, and polar bears don't live there. They live in the North Pole, which is why he said goodbye and walked 12,430 miles all the way back to the North Pole, where he belonged. He'd followed his wildest dream and had the best adventure. Even so, he was sad to think that he would never see a penguin again. But to Mr White's delight, he did! Ah, who's this in his hat? "Hello, how did you get there?" he said. "And where's your family?" "Oh, here we are," said Mr Pilchard Brown. "Someone put my egg in your hat. Was it you, Douglas? No? Was it you, Waddle? No? I wonder who it was." Peaky and Poots pointed at Pog. "Can we have our picnic now?" he said. And although the North Pole isn't home to penguins, Mr White was always happy to see his friends. "Welcome back," he said. Fancy getting there with the balloons. Ah, did you like that story? It was very good, wasn't it? And Waddle and Douglas have still got their eggs. Look, they're taking care of them. I'll let you know if they hatch. Okay? Bye, everybody.